Ndugu Spika, sababu huu mswada umeletwa hapa si eti ni mswada ambao unamkataza mwananchi wa kawaida ama kiongozi yule ambaye ana hela ya kulipa ama asaidie mahali kuna ugumu atoe hiyo hela. Shida iliyoko huu mswada, haja yake ni kuhakikisha kuwa wale ambao ni viongozi tumekuwa tukiiba rasilimali za wananchi, alafu tunaenda mpaka kwa matanga ndio kwenda kuonyesha wale watu maskini kwa wewe unaweza kulipa shilingi 1200 kumzika mtu aliyefariki, lakini wakati ulikuwa kiongozi haukuamka kuzungumza vile atatibiwa kwa hospitali ambako hamna madawa. Sheria ambayo tunataka kubadilisha ni kutoa ufisadi kutoka kwa kusaidia watu maskini, kwa sababu vile tunavyosaidia watu maskini tuna pretend kuwa tunawasaidia, lakini hatusuluhishi yale mashida ama zile shida ambazo nchi yetu inazo. So ndugu zangu wale mko hapa, mnaweza kufanya amendment, nakubali na nyinyi, lakini wacha niwaambie hivi: kwa sababu sisi ndio tumeharibu uongozi wa nchi yetu, kwa sababu sisi ndio mafisadi wakubwa, kwa sababu sisi ndio tumapretenda wakubwa, barabara ni mbaya, hospitali ni mbaya, madawa hakuna hospitali, maji hayako nyumbani, alafu ukisikia mtu ana diarrhea unasema tumia hao jamaa, watu washakufa, tutamzika ki? Ningependa kuwauliza nyinyi viongozi hapa, huu mswada uendelee hivyo hivyo, tutoe ufisadi kutoka kwa kusaidia mtu maskini, ili ukitoa pesa kanisa ama ukitoa pesa kwa mchango, tumia Safaricom na useme hiyo pesa ulitoa wapi, ukaleta kunitolea wakati nimefariki, kwa sababu wakati ambako nilikuwa mgonjwa hakukuwa na madawa. Asante ndugu Speaker.
Senator Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, taking over from where the Senator of Kisii has left, I want to remind colleagues that this is our baby. When we rose to respond to the disaster of the Gen Z, one of the things we resolved upon in this House, in that great debate that we had never seen before, was that we had to address the displeasure by the young people on how we spend all our time showing off opulence, choppers, vehicles that cost over 51 million shillings. And the youth, because they are better educated than what our generation was at their time, they are able to relate your income to what you contribute in Harambe. So we said, let us regulate this. The intention of this bill, and I want to urge colleagues, let us read it. The intention is not to abolish Harambees. The intention is to sanitize. The intention is to make it decent. The intention is to make sure that we don't hide in Harambees to practice corruption. How can you accept the fact that you are taking your ill-gotten money to a funeral of a mass accident like the one we had in Ekolomani at Iguhu River, Lukose? You take those millions, and yet the reasons why the accident took place is the bad state of the roads. If you had a dual carriage from Nairobi to Kakamega to Busia and Uganda, the accidents that take place on these roads would be cut by over 80%. So, Senator Mungatana, thank you very much for your passion. But the point is, don't give us money which you have stolen, which would have fixed the roads, and those bad roads have caused us to die. Don't bring us that money. Allow the police to come after you so that you can be brought to order.
What is your point of order, Senator Mungatana? Did you? Yes, Mr. Speaker, did you hear the senator from Kakamega, my very good honorable friend, say that they don't bring us the money that you have stolen? Mr. Speaker, is it a presumption that every person who actually, out of his good heart, or out of the problem that is there, and I'm speaking from about my county, Mr. Speaker, I don't know, Kakamega, maybe they are rich, Mr. Speaker. People are dying of hunger. If you get something and you want to help, is it a presumption, Mr. Speaker, that the people who are helping, the teachers, the doctors, the more prosperous farmers are thieves? Mr. Speaker, can Mr. Khalwale, Honorable Khalwale, my very good friend, please stop playing to the gallery and address the issues? I don't think that is a correct statement, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Mungatana, I don't think the Honorable Senator for Kakamega meant what you've just said. Indeed, if you remember during the debate on the state of the nation, none other than honorable senators were of the view, and that was after listening to the general public, that there could be dirty money that gets its way into the Harambees. And therefore, it's important to bring transparency in the Harambees. It's decent to bring some accountability in the way we do these Harambees. And out of that concern that the House had, and in fact, this House went to resolve certain actions to be taken. One of them is basically to legislate and bring sanity in the Harambe space. So yes, there's that general perception. And not everybody who contributes in a Harambe is a thief. But as you know, if I might use a Kiswahili saying, samaki moja kioza, bahari mzima imeoza. So this particular piece of legislation is to address that particular one thief and leave there 1,000 wonderful people. But at least that particular one person who we are not sure of how their sources of, these funds, the fund do not make its way into the hands of the public. That's why this law is proposed. But I do not think the Honorable Senator for Kakamega had an ill motive by saying that some of this money that would have otherwise fixed a road ended up in the wrong hands, and it is that money that is coming at the tail end to bury victims of that very bad road, which bad road came as a result of the money that had been maybe stolen. So it is that space that we are trying to clean up. There are good people who will bring their hard-earned money, and there are those questionable amounts that still find the way. So to clean up, to make sure that we have good money in this Harambe ecosystem, the proposed law is just to sanitize that space. Senator Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't have put it better, and I truly want to thank you. This bill is not a joke. Mr. Speaker, there is still money meant for drugs in hospital, and thanks to that shortage, patients die and they come to bury us. Mr. Speaker, there is still money meant to fix our roads. Mr. Speaker, they go ahead and buy four-wheel drives that can avoid potholes and buy choppers, and courtesy of those bad roads, when we die, they come to show us. We don't want that money. Mr. Speaker, in Tana River, I have had the choice and pleasure for 6 years to practice medicine in the Coast Province. And I know what poverty has done, not just in Western, but in Coast. So, Mr. Speaker, there is still money meant to improve the productivity of the lands in Coast so that they allow the people of Tana River to come to them through Harambees begging for food. Mr. Speaker, through this law, we don't want that kind of money. And Mr. Speaker, this law has been very well thought through. When you read through, Mr. Speaker, it is not casual. Let me respond, for example, to the concerns in this bill of the Senator of Tana River. We have Part Roman 3, which speaks to fundraising appeals. And they say, Mr. Speaker, in Clause 8, that the provision of this part shall not apply to a private fundraising appeal where the solicitation is made from members of for beneficiaries of the nuclear family or relatives and does not extend to members of the public. Clearly, this bill is going to allow us to sit as a family in Marinya, a family in Idaho, and do our fundraising. What they are against is public fundraising. And the law has gone further, Mr. Speaker, in Clause 9, has created distinction between public and private fundraising. It is the public fundraising that we want to control. I therefore, Mr. Speaker, wish to appeal to colleagues. Let's go through this proposal with a tooth comb so that we can refine it for it to be better. Are you saying this thing is a joke? When you saw a few days ago, none other than the Catholic bishops of Kenya speak to this issue. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, in unprecedented action, Archbishop Anyolo, who for the information of this House, is a man born from Shinyalu, and he's the Archbishop here in Nairobi. Philip Anyolo has done the unthinkable. He has returned money to politicians. So when you say we are doing something that does not appeal to the public, knowing that Catholics control over 50% of the Christians in this country, knowing that the Catholics have permeated all our villages and they could possibly be the voice of the poor who we pretend to be assisting when actually thieves are using that opportunity to sanitize money that they have stolen from our coffers. We must address it so that on Sunday, when I go to church, when you go to church, when all our other politicians go, including the head of state, he can comfortably make his contribution without any worries as to the interpretation. And this law has gone further, Mr. Speaker. They have said in this law, in Clause 11, they have put exemptions. Exemptions are here. Senator for Narok, if you go to Clause 11, they tell you money or property collected by or under the authority of a recognized representative of a religious association is exempted. It means once the law is through, we can then go to Archbishop Anyolo and give him our contribution to help the church to be constructed. I would be the last person, Mr. Speaker, to fight the Harambe spirit. Because if it had not been for the 100 shillings in 1976, which Mwiriza Lihalanganga gave me as a contribution to my Harambe, I would not have finished my education in Musingo High School. Mr. Speaker, Musingo High School, one of the top schools in this country, was started by the spirit of Harambe. Shibwe Hospital today, which I have created from a dispensary, that dispensary was started by Harambe. So Harambe is good, but unregulated, you leave it to where you see people using it to sanitize the money they steal from us. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by acknowledging that this is indeed a difficult decision to make, because somebody who will not take trouble to read this law, he will think you are against charitable activity. No. In fact, one of the charitable organizations that I belong to, Touch Africa, where I'm a director of the foundation, was started by the late Michael Kijana Wamalwa because he believed in touching people. We want to touch people, but touch them with honor and touch them not when we are taking advantage of them. Mr. Speaker, I support strongly and I propose that at the right time we'll come with proposals to amend so as to make this bill better. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Kina.
Mr. Speaker, let me begin by saying that I have no beef with people coming together to be able to help one individual improve their status of living. Mr. Speaker, I grew up in a society where we encourage a lot of the Harambe movement, but I believe that the pace which we are taking now, Mr. Speaker, to be able to regulate fundraisings is completely ill-advised. And I say so, Mr. Speaker, because I've taken some time to read through this fundraising bill. And I do not support the proposals which are being made in this bill. Mr. Speaker, we are a society, a country, which now we should be working hard to ensure that every citizen has got access to free health care. We should be working so hard, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that every student, every young kid born from the Bundus of Narok or from the other Bundus of Lake Turkana are able to get access to quality and free education as well as healthcare. Mr. Speaker, what we are doing now by regulating this kind of fundraising is by making sure that we are condemning this generation into poverty. Mr. Speaker, I completely detest that approach. I've sat down there listening to the Chief Whip talking about when he went to school, that he could not have finished school without Harambe. That is very true to all of us. But are we going to stagnate and stay there for the rest of our generation? Or are we going to do things differently? Earlier on, in the morning session, Mr. Speaker, we had the Cabinet Secretary of Housing, Lands and Housing. And she made a statement here and said that Narok County, with 6 sub-counties, will be entitled to a minimum of 220 houses per sub-county. That makes it about 1,320 houses for Narok County. When I stood to inquire further on that, she said that that is just the beginning. Mr. Speaker, I want to invite my colleagues for us to discuss here is how do we make sure that if our funds are being deducted from our salaries, we can guarantee that those who have not been given an opportunity to get where we are, the state takes that responsibility. When you now require us to profile individuals who are going to be carrying out fundraising activities, Mr. Speaker, the only thing that I conclude is that we are content with being poor, and we are content with widening the gap between the rich and the poor. Mr. Speaker, you cannot say that you will maintain an annual register of persons licensed by it to conduct a public fundraising appeal under this act. You go further and you say that you are now going to have a cabinet secretary who is going to authorize. You go further and you say that in each and every county, Mr. Speaker, you're going to have a CC member who is going to keep a register. I think, Mr. Speaker, we are losing. We are completely losing our trajectory in terms of development in this country. If we were arguing, if the sponsor of this bill was saying, let us now regulate charitable organizations. Let us register charitable organizations that can be able to spell out their mission and goals. We regulate them and allow them to carry out fundraising. In America, where I spent almost 20 years of my life, we had non-profit organizations, we have charitable organizations, but now when it comes here and you're saying you want to be able to profile individuals and keep a list of individuals, I wish we were talking about keeping a list of charitable organizations. I think we need to change, Mr. Speaker. We need to start saying, when did the rain start beating us to a point where now primary schools, we are paying them, when we had made progress, when the late president came into power, where kids could easily go to school for free. Right now, Mr. Speaker, if you ask any of these members who are seated here to show you their phones, there is a Harambe invitation for Harambe to pay for kids to go to school. There is a Harambe for a person to go to hospital. And then, Mr. Speaker, in this bill, it talks about, which I really detest completely. It says, this is an act of parliament to provide a framework for regulations in the conduct of public fundraising appeals to promote transparency and accountability in carrying out of fundraising appeals and foster great philanthropy. How do you foster great philanthropy when everybody in this country knows that the only people who can come up with money are politicians? Aren't you just encouraging corruption then? Aren't you encouraging an issue where you are elected into office because of how much you can be able to give instead of meritocracy? I think we need to focus on developing this nation. We need to come up with policies that will ensure that we narrow this gap between the rich and the poor, those who have and those who have none. We made progress by introducing a new constitution, where now we have counties. You know, even the way we make legislation, Mr. Speaker, has got to change now completely. It has got to change. I long for the time that we will be sitting here and saying, in Tana River County, the residents of that county have decided that every child in that county will go to school for free, and that the money that they are being taxed will be able to be directed there. But now, if we are even regulating fundraising, and then in this same law, you say you are excluding, I like what my good friend Bonnie Khalwale said, we are excluding family fundraising activities. You know? I mean, seriously. I want to beseech all of us that we move away from this kind of legislation. We are over-legislating. I want to beseech all of us that we sit down and say, how are we going to make sure that we develop policies that will ensure that in future, a granddaughter of the majority whip or majority leader will be able to go to school and not having to worry about Harambees. You know? Yes. You know, this issue of majority leader for us keep on saying harambe, 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 is really pushing us back. We were profiled as a less developed country. We went up to now a medium developing country, a developing country. We have now gone to a point where now we are saying there are those developed nations. And when we go to these international conferences, and I'm sure my good brother, the chair of PAC, will tell you that when they went to COP29, our president did not even go. So it was just a room full of individuals who have got dreams but cannot be able to implement them. They were just talking about, we want to give Africa $1.3 trillion just because we spent $3 trillion in promoting warfare among countries. It's a talk shop. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to plead with the sponsor of this bill, my good brother, my good friend, the majority leader, to change, to amend everything and say, let us regulate charitable organizations. That is number one. I will support him 100% on that. Number two, let us ensure that we've registered these non-profits such that if they are supported by an entity outside the country, whatever is imported here is not taxed again at the airport. Because you've seen, I'm sure the majority leader has received so many phone calls from NGOs saying, these books were donated to us, but they are now asking us to pay taxes. So, to save this, let us not limit it down to individuals. Let us come up with the proper regulations of charitable organizations. Let us persuade each county to say, what is the biggest problem? Recently, Mr. Speaker, I saw a Gazette notice where the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Foreign Affairs has decided to give immunity to one charitable organization called the Melinda Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And in the reasoning of giving that immunity, there's one word that caught my attention. This is a charity organization that has been set up to fight poverty. And that is now where we are giving them immunity. But that immunity only extends to expatriates who come and work in this country. But Kenyans who would have been co-opted to work in that company will not be immune. Come on. Why are we creating these different classes? Why are we profiling people? So I want to support, and I plead with Majority Leader, because he's one young man who is very, very intelligent and has really managed to change a lot of things, that let us, during the committee of the whole, change the act or the proposed legislation. Let us strictly regulate charitable organizations. Once we regulate those charitable organizations, the role of counties can now come in and say, because we all know our counties. We all know the status of our counties. We are informed by session paper number 10 of 1965. We are informed by the current situations of our division of revenue bill, our CARA, how money is divided. We are informed by the debate that we have on a daily basis of how we divide revenue, whether by the size of the land or by the number of people who are there. We are informed by the Kenya Bureau of Statistics that tells us about the poverty in our counties. Why can we then ensure that in each and every county, Mr. Speaker, charitable organizations that are set up to work there are helped, assisted, and they are registered based on the circumstances of each of that county? There will be no interest of you supporting a charitable organization that is coming to Narok to be able to count wild animals. What for? But if you're telling me that you will go to West Pokot and ensure that you are funding a charitable organization that brings people together for cohesion, make sure that it supports education, I'll be among the first one to say, let's go for it. So, Mr. Speaker, to end, I would like to see this bill becomes law, but let us make it such that it doesn't profile people. Number two, such that it doesn't keep us stagnating. Let us now think like these developed nations that want to sponsor this charity organization. And you will know something, Mr. Speaker, as I wind up. A lot of these charity organizations will raise $1 billion. And they will say, we are going to fight poverty in Africa. And they will say, for Kenya, we'll give Kenya $200 million. I'm telling you, Mr. Speaker, and this is a fact, and you can go check. By the time that money lands to Kenya, 80% has gone into administration. Only 20% is what ends up fighting that poverty. So, Mr. Speaker, this is an area that I'm quite vast, and I want to support the majority leader in regulating charitable organizations. We want to make it easy for people to be able to improve their standard of living. If today I want to go to Senator Kipsang's home and support a local church there, I should not be regulated to do that, really. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chimera.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii. Hata mimi pia niweke kauli yangu kwa mswada huu, Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, nimesikiza changizo za viongozi wenzangu kwa mswada huu, Bwana Spika. Na nimeona ni kama tunakingana kimawazo, Bwana Spika. Kuna wale ambao wamelichukulia swala lote hili kimakosa na kwamba wakaona sababu kuu ambayo ni kwa nini sheria hii imefika katika bunge letu la Seneti hii siku ya leo, Bwana Spika, ni kutokana na ule msukumo wa wale vijana wetu Gen Z ambao kwamba wao, na mimi naungana mkono na wao pia, Bwana Spika, naunga mkono wao kwa sababu pia tuliona kweli hapo awali kwamba viongozi, baadhi ya watu katika nyadhifa mbalimbali katika uongozi katika nchi hii waliweza kuonekana kwamba wapo mstari wa mbele kufanya harambe ambazo ni za kutishia mno. Kutishia kwamba kile kiwango ambacho wanatoa katika harambe zile, Bwana Spika, kumradhi, kilikuwa kiwango cha juu zaidi. Na viongozi wengi ukiangalia mstakabala wao, Spika, ukiangalia ule mshahara ambao tunapokea kama maseneta, kama wabunge, kama ma-MCAs, kama magavana na kama makatibu na mawaziri, Bwana Spika, hailingani na kile kiwango ambacho wanatoa katika harambe hizi. Na ndiposa mori ama hasira ikaweza kuwajaa wale vijana wa Gen Z na wakasukuma kwamba lazima iwe sheria kwamba harambe hizi ziweze kudhibitiwa, Bwana Spika. Lakini Spika, nikueleze kwamba naweza endelea. Nikueleze kwamba Bwana Spika kwamba hatua ile ya kutaka kuhakikisha kwamba kuna sheria ya kudhibiti harambe, Spika, nafikiri wazungu husema ni knee jerk reaction, kwamba ni magoti juu naelezewa hapa nyuma, na haitoi suluhu ya tatizo lote hili, Spika. Spika, leo hii mimi ni seneta maalum, ninawakilisha vijana na natokea kaunti ya Khalwale, Spika. Na Spika, kila kukicha, Spika, simu yangu ya rununu, simu ya mke wangu ya rununu, simu ya PA, simu ya hata wazazi wangu, Spika, hupata jumbe za kwamba kuna mchango mahali, Spika, kwamba kuna mgonjwa anahitaji matibabu, Spika, na mimi kama kiongozi ambaye nimeteuliwa, Spika, sijapigiwa hata kura, Spika. Hata sijataka kusema kwamba nataka kuwania nyadhifa yoyote katika kaunti yangu ya Khalwale, Spika. Lakini kwa sababu wananchi wa Khalwale na wananchi wa Kenya kwa ujumla, Spika, wana tabu, wana shida na wanatamani kupata msaada kutoka kwa viongozi wao, Spika, unapata jumbe zile za kualika katika harambe mbalimbali, aidha kuchangia karo, Spika, aidha kuchangia ujenzi Nikueleze tu mimi mwenyewe pale eneo bunge la Kinango, mahali panaitwa kwa Kadogo. Jamii ya pale kwa Kadogo, Bi Speaker, imenifuata mara nyingi sana wakiomba msaada wa kutengeneza choo cha umma, Bi Speaker. Choo cha umma ambacho ni jukumu la pengine serikali ya county, Bi Speaker, lakini serikali ya county haiwezi fanya kila kitu, Bi Speaker, kwa sababu ya uhaba wa fedha na mipangilio, Bi Speaker. Ikiwa wananchi wetu wanahitaji choo cha umma, Bi Speaker, cha shilingi tu 1000 takriban 70 ama 100,000, na wamemfuata kiongozi aweze kuongoza katika shughuli ya kufanya changizo, ya kufanya harambee, ili waweze kuwezeshwa kufanya mradi ule ambao utawasaidia jamii nzima kwa ujumla, sio kwa leo wala sio kesho wala sio mtondogoo, Bi Speaker, lakini kwa siku nyingi zijazo, Bi Speaker. Sioni makosa pale kiongozi akifanya mchango ule, Bi Speaker. Vile vile, Bi Speaker, nikinaya kwamba kuona sheria hii, Bi Speaker, inampatia mtu binafsi ambaye ni waziri wa serikali kuu na waziri wa serikali ya county nguvu kupita kiasi katika hali hii ya kudhibiti swala lote hili la harambe, Bi Speaker. Bi Speaker, tusiwe jumba la kuleta sheria ambayo itatufinya sisi wenyewe kama viongozi, Bi Speaker. Lazima tuketi chini, tuulizane shida ipo wapi. Ikiwa tunafanya harambee nyingi kwa sababu ya ugonjwa, Bi Speaker, nafikiri serikali hii kwa sasa, Bi Speaker, na imekuwa ni juhudi za serikali zilizopita hapo awamu ya kutafuta suluhu ya kuhakikisha kwamba kila Mkenya leo hii anaweza kupata matibabu bila kupitia dhiki ya kuuza mali yake, bila kupitia dhiki ya kufanya harambee zisizopungua, Bi Speaker, ili kupata matibabu, Bi Speaker. Na nataka nishukuru serikali kwa ule mfumo wake.
What's your point of order, Senator Chiradike? Chiradike, I don't know why you are testing your card on the dispatch box.
No, Madam Speaker, it's not functional, and I wish the new commissioner was around. We would have launched a formal complaint before the new commissioner. Madam Speaker, I'm standing under order, standing order number 105 on accuracy of facts, and also under Article 96 of the Constitution of Kenya. If you had the humble submissions by our brother-in-law as Nandi County, Senator Chimera, Madam Speaker, she has asserted that there are other forces who are forcing the Parliament of Kenya to do legislative interventions. Yet under the Constitution, Madam Speaker, it is our inherent right as legislators. Could he be ruled out of order for implying that we get other orders from even other people, Madam Speaker, so that even your visitors who are on the gallery might imagine that we legislate based on knee-jerk reaction, Madam Speaker? Is it in order?
Before I give you a chance to respond to that point of order, let me do a communication. Honorable Senators, I have a communication from the chair of the Visiting Community-Based Organization, CBO, from Ikolomani constituency in Kakamega County. I would like to acknowledge the presence in the public gallery this afternoon of a Visiting Community-Based Organization, CBO, Shisele Tosha, from Ikolomani constituency in Kakamega County. The delegation is in the Senate on a courtesy call to Honorable Rachel Ameso Amolo, Commissioner of the Parliamentary Service Commission. In our usual tradition, Honorable Senators, of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to the delegation, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit, and I thank you. I want to give this opportunity to the Senator for Kakamega County, Dr. Senator Boni Khalwale, to welcome this delegation to Senate.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Madam Chair, through you, allow me to welcome the young women from Kolomani and have special words to say thank you to Honorable Rachel Ameso, who is the host of this CBO. Honorable Rachel Ameso, for information, Chair, is one of our commissioners of the Parliamentary Service Commission. Madam Speaker, I'm aware that the Commissioner purposes to become the woman MP of Kakamega.
Senator
And I want-
Abbas, is that the normal courtesy you're supposed to use when you're... Can you courtesy the speakers?
Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, and I want to wish her well. Allow me also, as I welcome these great women, to congratulate the MCA of Idaho North, Mama Gladys Mugongolo. I'm sure she's in the delegation. And Madam Speaker, what a coincidence that the name Shisere is in the House today when the hospital that I have created from a dispensary to a maternity health center is by the same name, and it was started courtesy to a Harambe by Seth Lugonzo. I therefore wish to thank you for coming, and I would like that if you finish quickly, I would like to meet you behind the tent so that Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Speaker.
Boni Halwale, that language is not parliamentary. We did not understand what language you used, but we will not use more time. But you are cautioned to use parliamentary language. One understood. Point of order, Senator Wakoli. You may resume your seat. Senator Wakoli.
Honorable Speaker, what my good doctor and bullfighter is saying, that we're extending an olive hand, a hand of welcome, and that we are going to do what we have always done, to guest and honorable people from our community. On behalf of Bungoma, I also welcome my mothers in the House. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Wakoli. Senator Chimera, you can proceed to clarify what you meant on the point of order raised by Senator Cherarigi.
Asante, Speaker. Nafikiri Senator ndugu yangu kutoka Nandi alikuwa anazungumzia kuhusu ule mshtuko wa goti, kuashiria kwamba tunaleta sheria kwa sababu ya ile hali ya wazungu nikitohoa wanaita knee jerk reaction, Speaker. Nimemaanisha kwamba, sikumaanisha kwamba kuna msukumo kutoka sehemu mbalimbali, lakini ile hali ya kwamba vijana wetu walipiga kelele kuhusu na ile taswira yote ya masuala ya Harambe, na ndipo sasa tunaona sheria hii imefika bungeni leo. Sikusema kwa kukusudia vibaya, Speaker, lakini nilikuwa naweka wazi tu kwamba kuna mchipuko wa ni hali gani ambayo sheria hii imefika bungeni leo hii, Speaker. Kunradhi, naomba kama imeeleweka niweze kuendelea na changizo yangu.
You can proceed.
Asante, Speaker. Speaker, nilikuwa nasema kwanza mimi ninafikiri hapo awali nataka kusema kwamba ninapinga vikali sana sheria hii, Speaker. Kwa sababu ukiangalia kipengele cha 13 1 na 2 kinasema kwamba mtu yoyote yule ambaye ako katika ofisi ya umma kama kiongozi haruhusiwi kujihusisha kamwe na shughuli za Harambe, Speaker. Vile vile pia inasema mtu yoyote yule ambaye anapania kugombania kiti cha umma aidha cha kisiasa, Speaker, pia ndani ya takriban miaka 3 kabla ya uchaguzi mkuu haruhusiwi kufanya Harambe, Speaker. Speaker, ni kinaya kwa sababu shughuli yote ya uongozi, Speaker, ni kusaidia jamii yako. Na mtu asikuelezee kwamba kwa sababu kuna hundi ya CDF ama hundi ya ngaf ama gavana ana fedha ile ambayo inamfikia kule ambayo tumepitisha leo, nafikiri bilioni takriban milioni 387, na niipongeze ile kamati ya mediation kwa kufanya hivyo. Lakini imaanishi kwamba ukiwa na pesa ile ambayo kwa mfano una jukumu la kuleta basari, Speaker, basi uwezi kwenda kwa mfuko wako kibinafsi wewe mwenyewe kusaidia jamii yako. Nafikiri sio uongozi halisi, Speaker. Na vile vile pia sisi wa pwani tunasema kuna kutoa sadaka kwa Mwenyezi Mungu, Speaker. Ukitoa, Speaker, imaanishi wewe ni tajiri. Kuna msemo unasema kutoa ni moyo wala sio tajiri, Speaker. Ukichanga, Speaker, wewe umeunda sadaka yako kwa Mwenyezi Mungu, Speaker. Kwa sababu kuna maisha ya dunia na maisha ya kule ahera, Speaker. Na sioni haja kwa nini tunaweka sheria kumdhibiti kiongozi ambaye kama ndugu yangu senior wangu Mheshimiwa Mungatana, yeye yupo tayari kusaidia watu wa Tana River, Speaker. Na sisemi yeye ni tajiri. Vile vile mimi Senator Chimera nimeteuliwa, nipo tayari kusaidia watu wa Kwale katika changizo zao, Speaker. Iwe ni mchango wa harambe ya mambo ya afya, iwe ni mchango wa kujenga kanisa, na hata hii weekend inakuja nitakwenda Lunga Catholic Church, Speaker, kufanya mchango ambao wamenialika wao wenyewe, kwa sababu mimi nina imani, mimi ni Mkristo Mkatholiki. Nina imani kwamba na Biblia inasema kwamba tukija pamoja Yesu yu ndani yetu, na kwamba ni jukumu langu kama kiongozi kujenga hekalu la Mwenyezi Mungu. Pia nimealikwa vile vile katika Harambe pale Guro kujenga kituo cha afya, ambayo si jukumu langu, Speaker. Lakini mimi ni kiongozi, Speaker. Siwezi sema siwezi, na sina ile fedha ya kufanya ule mchango, Speaker. Lakini kuna marafiki ambao wamekwenda shule, ni wafanyabiashara, Mwenyezi Mungu amewabariki na wapo na nia ya kuregesha mkono katika jamii zao. Sio sawa, Speaker, kuleta sheria ya kudhibiti mtu ambaye yuko tayari kutoa. Na nimesema kutoa ni moyo wala sio tajiri. Asante sana, Speaker, na mimi napinga vikali mswada huu. Shukran na Mungu awabariki, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Senator Eddie Okech.
Madam Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity to also try and give a few thoughts on this particular bill that has been moved by the majority leader, that essentially this bill seeks to, curb fundraising, if I might, or rather regulate fundraising, if I might put it as simple as such, Madam Speaker. I think one thing I must say, Mr. Speaker, is that the majority leader has been greatly misunderstood. I listened to the minority whip describing the intent of this bill as being able to overly deal with any kind of donations or any kind of charitable deeds, especially when it comes to money. I don't think that that is what the majority leader seeks to cure here, because I don't think that the idea of this bill is to attack, for instance, the charitable organizations that we have in this country, if you may call them also non-profit organizations. I think that what the majority is seeking to cure here is the problems that we have seen in this country of public leaders using the platforms of fundraising as a way of basically capturing the people and as a way of insincerely taking control of public discourse. I think that is a fundamental problem. And Madam Speaker, I think that to that extent, the majority leader is very right. Because, Madam Speaker, Chapter 6 of the Constitution, which is what I think is the crust of the problem the majority seeks to solve here, Madam Speaker, Article 73, under that Chapter 6, talks about responsibility of leadership. And Madam Speaker, we have seen a lot of lack of responsibility by leadership, where the political leadership, to be specific, has been very irresponsible on issues of fundraising. Madam Speaker, one, the responsibility comes in the form of, the amounts of money that we see going to fundraising are amounts of money that cannot be explained by any means possible by the political class. This is a reality that the public is getting tired of that kind of behavior. And then number two, we are seeing a pseudo control whereby when a politician contributes in different platforms or different institutions, then they take control of that institution completely. Now, this is a reality that we must face as a country. This is why the majority leaders come with this particular bill. And that is the reason why I'm taking you back to Article 73 under Chapter 6 of the Constitution that talks about responsibility of leadership, where it says, under Sub-Article 1, that authority assigned to a state officer, A, is a public trust to be exercised in a manner that is inconsistent with the purposes and objectives of this Constitution, demonstrates respect of the people, brings honor to the nation and dignity of the office, and promotes public confidence in the integrity of the office. Madam Speaker, what has happened in this country is that people have lost public trust in public officers by being led by politicians particularly, and then politicians who are going to do Harambees in different places, Madam Speaker, have also lost respect for the people, Madam Speaker. And also, the acts of Harambees that we are seeing in this country, in the manner in which they are exercised, Madam Speaker, do not bring honor to the nation, and they do not bring integrity and dignity to the offices that we have. What does this mean, Madam Speaker? If you further in that article, sub-article B, it says that authority assigned to a state officer vests in the state officer the responsibility to serve the people, service, rather than the power to rule over them. The political class, because of this Harambe, are ruling over our people. They are not serving our people, Madam Speaker. So this is a problem that is a serious conversation that the majority has brought in this house that then must be addressed. Now, the question is this. Is this the right way to respond to this problem that we are facing in the country? This is what I want to appeal to the majority leader, that this is not the right way to be able to respond to this problem. Because what the majority leader is trying to do here is that is trying to legislate bad behavior. Madam Speaker, you cannot legislate bad behavior by politicians in this country to use platform of fundraising to control the people, to rule over the people, to disrespect the people, to take advantage of the people, Madam Speaker. This bill is basically indicting the EACC, Madam Speaker, because we established a constitutionally allowed institution to deal with the misbehaviors of public officers and state officers under EACC, Madam Speaker. This bill basically tells us that the EACC has completely failed in doing its work. And instead of sponsoring this bill, Madam Speaker, I want to encourage the majority leader that together we can work on rethinking the EACC in terms of the way the EACC can deal with matters of Chapter 6 of the Constitution, Madam Speaker. Because that's where the rot is coming from. You cannot legislate fundraising in this country, Madam Speaker. Because we are people of Kenya and we come from communities, from the family to the community, to the tribe, to the county, and then to the nation, Madam Speaker. We know what fundraising goes to do, Madam Speaker. And for the purpose of this conversation, Madam Speaker, I want to enumerate them. Madam Speaker, we have got 4 fundamental areas where our people find themselves in situations that they did not wish to find themselves in, where then they are forced to fundraise for. The first one, Madam Speaker, is education. Madam Speaker, there are schools in Nyatike sub-county. There are schools in Masangora, in Kuria West sub-county. There are schools in Kuria East, Madam Speaker. There are schools in Rongo, where I come from, that kids sit under the table of their parents to be educated. And when they go to school, they sit under the tree to be educated. What is wrong when that community comes together to sit down, that in the event that the government hasn't built a school there, then they can come together as a community to build those schools, Madam Speaker? What is the problem with that? And are you telling me that today, Madam Speaker, if there are people who have come and they don't come from a family of well-being, then they cannot reach out to their neighbors who are well off in the neighborhood to come and help them build those schools? Madam Speaker, all the schools in this country have been built as a function of fundraising. We cannot kill that, Madam Speaker. On the same education, Madam Speaker, the next problem is the problem of school fee, Madam Speaker. I can assure you, Madam Speaker, that 70% of young people who have passed primary school, Madam Speaker, cannot afford to go to school, despite the fact that we have got CDF to supplement their school fee, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I take this time to share with you, and I'm not doing this for the sake of gimmicks. In the year 2005, Madam Speaker, having been adopted by a Kikuyu family in 2004 and lived with 8 families, I was meant to join Friends School Kamusinga in 2006 because I did my exams in 2005. And Madam Speaker, because I could not be able to afford school fee, remember that what we are doing now, the former president, President Kibaki, had tried to do it by executive power. President Kibaki had put an executive order that banned public solicitation of funds in 2004, 2003, Madam Speaker. When I passed to go to Friends School Kamusinga, Madam Speaker, I did not have money. But because the issue of fundraising had been banned by the Kibaki administration, Madam Speaker, it meant that I had to go to the DC to be able to get a form of a pro forma to raise money, Madam Speaker. For 3 months, I could not be able to get the DC to write for me a pro forma to go and solicit funds, Madam Speaker. When I eventually got the pro forma, Madam Speaker, I was only able to raise 800 shillings after 3 months, Madam Speaker. I missed my entire first semester or first term because I could not be able to raise money and I could not be able to go through getting even to the DC's office, Madam Speaker. And I had to join Friends School Kamusinga in second term when all my peers had already gone through a first term, Madam Speaker. And even then, it was through that act of having a pro forma, Madam Speaker, that I met one gentleman called Kennedy Okongo, a lawyer in town, who wrote for me the full check to go to school and be able to be a senator today in this house, Madam Speaker. Then today you are saying that for kids like me who might not have been aggressive enough to get to a DC, now has to go to a cabinet secretary or a CEC in county to get to be financed to get a fundraising document to go and raise money. Where are we going as a country, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, number 2, the area that people are facing a lot of problems in is medical issues, Madam Speaker. It might look simple for people here who have got medical cover to think that medical issues in this country are easy. But, Madam Speaker, we have got people in this country who are held as prisoners of hospitals because they cannot be able to pay 30,000 shillings to get out of an hospital, Madam Speaker. So the moment you say that for them to be able to raise money, to leave hospitals, to raise money, to go and get medical attention, Madam Speaker, then they must look for the CEC. They must form a committee. They must look for people who are well off. Madam Speaker, what are we doing to our country? Let us legislate for not the bad manners of politicians. Let EACC do their job, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we also have another area here that people just don't understand. The burden of funerals in this country, Madam Speaker. That's another area that me as a political class have faced a lot of requests on, where people, somebody has suffered and died in a hospital. Then they get imprisoned in mortuary, yet they're dead, because their own families cannot be able to afford a fee of 30,000, 10,000 shillings, sometimes as little as 5,000 shillings, Madam Speaker. A family cannot be able to get their person out of a mortuary. What is wrong with that person reaching out to a neighbor or to me, who might be a little bit privileged, to help out and to lend a hand to get this person out of a mortuary, Madam Speaker? These are real issues. They're not stories. They are in our communities, Madam Speaker. Now, I know that the bone of contention that has been there is the issue of church and mosques, Madam Speaker, where the political class have been able to use pulpits and places of mosque to do political campaigns and make it difficult to make sense for nourishment of our people in terms of spirituality, Madam Speaker. Again, I do not support the idea that we can ban fundraising for churches, that we can ban fundraising for mosques, Madam Speaker, because the roles that mosques and churches play in terms of moral compass of our community, Madam Speaker, the value might not be quantifiable, but indeed it's untold in terms of the impact they're having on our community. I think that, Madam Speaker, let the churches self-regulate in terms of controlling the bad manners of some few politicians. And it's not all of them, Madam Speaker. It's some few politicians who have got bad manners of using this platform as a place of bravado and ego setting in terms of their political nourishment instead of their spiritual nourishment, Madam Speaker. But we cannot ban the political class, the public officer, the state officer, the private individual, the corporate individual from raising money to grow churches, to grow mosques, and to grow houses of worship when these places are actually helping to contribute in supplementing the government's effort in terms of building our moral capacity in this country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if you want to build a strong home, you must constantly build 3 things in a human being. That is why, even in creation, there is Holy Trinity. That's why even in creation, we are created in 3. in threes, Madam Speaker. The first thing you must feed in a human being, Madam Speaker, is the mind of a human being. That's why we have got education system. But once you fed the mind of a human being, Madam Speaker, there is still no peace if you do not feed the heart of a human being, Madam Speaker. And that is where the churches and the mosques are coming from, Madam Speaker. But a peaceful heart with an educated mind is never peaceful unless you also feed the stomach of this human being, Madam Speaker. That's when you have got a complete human being, Madam Speaker. So any moment you take away any of those segments in the society, you can't make it. We as a government and as a political class can only feed the stomach. Education institutions can only feed the brain. Where do we leave the hearts of our people? It is to the churches and the mosque, and we cannot allow for any law that makes it impossible to build those churches and to build those mosques, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in this bill, we have also seen a provision, very fast, Madam Speaker, that says if you want to do fundraising, then you must do it in your family. So what happens to a family where, I come from a family where the first name that has been heard about in this country, Madam Speaker, in our family, in our entire generation, that Arun Cheriot knows is Eddie Okech. Because my grandfather, Kawisa, died long time ago in some village in Nyakune, near Gogo Falls, that nobody knows, meaning it has got an impact on the well-being of my entire community and my entire families. So you are letting me be in a situation where if you want to do for fundraising, I can only do it with my family and not with the family of Mungatana who I now know, who I can invite and tell him, support me here and there. Madam Speaker, this is now discriminating and then making people to be in their own cocoons of successful families, the haves versus have-nots. We cannot allow that in our country, Madam Speaker. And lastly, Madam Speaker, there is the issue of the regulators. You are talking about regulations being done by Cabinet Secretary. Madam Speaker, in law, it looks easy. But in practice, how will this Cabinet Secretary regulate the President in terms of making sure that the President abides by the requirements of this law? It's not possible. The President cannot be regulated by the person that is the supervisor and the boss of. Madam Speaker, at the county level, you are saying in this bill that the CEC, in charge of planning and social development, will regulate fundraising. How will this person regulate the governor, where our governors have got so much ego that you cannot even tell them something in a funeral or in a function? It will mean that some political class will have more powers to even take advantage of fundraising further than some political class that don't have power. Yeah? So it will be a business for the higher political class to actually do what they want with this fundraising thing and leave those people who are smaller to be, in fact, you are giving the most powerful political people a tool to harass their opponents and other people with this bill, Madam Speaker. This is a good and a well-intended bill to cure the problems of our leadership under Article 17 of the Constitution, but it is not a solution. It is legislating a behavior of bad politics, bad manners of politicians that cannot be cured by this bill. Let us sit as a house and come up with a legislation that will help us rethink the entire EACC and make sure that EACC can do its job or disband it and come with a more functional anti-corruption institution that can deal with corrupt leaders. With that, Madam Speaker, I reject this bill in entirety. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Eddie. Senator Abbas Sheikh Mohammed.
Right. Sitting all day. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to also join my colleagues that this bill will not help any Kenyan. As you are aware, the spirit of Harambe has been the fundamental cornerstone for this country in terms of development. It's only after CDF and the other funds came in and the country economy improved that people want to change the spirit of brotherhood. The Harambees or the fundraisers have created cohesion in this country. That most of the poor people have really come up. Most of the students that today, most of our professionals went for scholarships outside the country through Harambees.
It created, fundraisings and Harambees have created love among the communities. It's only through sharing with the poor that we love one another. Honorable Speaker, we cannot today throw away the brotherhood that Harambees have created. As you are aware, this country, almost 70% is below the poverty line. And they cannot even afford 2 meals in a day. They cannot afford to pay school fees. Initially, the government said there's free education, but we're not seeing any free education here today. You are seeing even the primary kids have been told go and bring money. Mothers cannot even afford. They even sell chickens and all these things. Honorable Speaker, I've started working with this government way back in the 80s. And by the time I was starting job, the Harambe was actually at the peak. Because there was no school infrastructures. Kids were learning in the school and the trees. At times, the chiefs were being used to go and collect animals or money from within the villages. Of course, sometimes they were using excessive force. There was a bit of corruption. But today, the classroom that I went to, in my class 1, actually was built with Harambe. And therefore, I cannot be able to support today to say that Harambe should be stopped or should be monitored. That cannot work for us. Honorable Speaker, through fundraising, actually many Kenyans have sought medical treatment outside this country. Medical conditions of these days, there's so many people who are sick. The medical services, hospitals actually have so much been commercialized. That somebody stays in an ICU or HDU in 1 night or 2 nights and 3 nights, the cost becomes just unbelievable high. It is through Harambees that we're able to save people, the dead bodies, from mortuaries because they've been held custody until money is paid back. Honorable Speaker, I will agree that I will say that the corrupt are not the poor people. The corruption comes from the highest echelons. The top guys who are stealing money. The people who have the money. These 80% or 90% of Kenyans cannot even access money. They survive on only Harambees and goodwills of their friends and the next of kins. So if anybody wants to stop corruption through stopping Harambe, I think that's very wrong. What I will say is that those who still pay more and more Harambe so that this money can come back to the public. If you say there's no Harambe, then those who stole, the corrupt people will keep the money in the banks or even overseas. So I think we will encourage more Harambes. If you will ask me, that we will say so that at least the little they pay back, I think can be able to help the people that they have stolen their money. Honorable Speakers, I think what we are talking about here is kind of pretense, because I was hearing some of my colleagues here talking that Harambe will do this, Harambe is going to create corruption. My friend, corruption is not coming from the grassroots, it comes from the high top, and top and to down. Harambe, we know that it is actually starting from the office institutions. So, Honorable Speaker, I think Harambes shall not be controlled. Harambes cannot, if you want somebody to stop corruption, let this House produce, or let's institute a bill that will seriously deal with corrupt people. Like the China, even if it's going to be killing somebody, even if you're going to jail somebody 100 years, so that somebody can be able to face the consequences of his stealing. But Islamic Harambe, just because somebody has stolen and they want to clean his money, will not help with stop corruption. With those few remarks, I beg to support. I want to oppose the bill.
Thank you, Senator Abbas. Senator William Kipkemoi Kisang.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I believe the intent of the bill originally was not bad because we had issues in June, and because of the conversation we had at the State of the Nation debate, this is bill is as a result of what happened that time, Honorable Speaker. And I want to report to you, Madam Speaker, that some of us went to school because of Harambes, if you get somebody who is 45 years and above, who is in this house, or outside there, Madam Speaker, most schools at that time, there used to be two types of schools. There was schools done by government, and there were some Harambe secondary schools. Most of our public schools now in the rural